Hello everybody, thank you for watching, and if you like this video please like and share and subscribe, of course. Sorry I haven't done any videos for a while. I've decided with the tarot cards I'm going to learn the deck and the meanings first to make the videos quicker before I continue with those. The reason I'm doing a video today is because I want to talk about forgiveness, about the importance of it and why we should all endeavour to forgive. So the other day I was thinking about this, and what I saw in my mind's eye was, if you can imagine a landscape and you're looking at it from the sky, from above, and on this landscape there are numerous volcanoes, different sizes, different shapes. Some are enormous and some are little more than a small hill. And underneath this landscape of volcanoes is a lava bed which feeds all of these volcanoes. So you could look at it like akin to an infection inside of you, that you don't see the infection, but you see the expression on the surface of that infection. So a skin rash, something like that. Spots, pimples, other illnesses. So the expressions that you notice are akin in this analogy to the volcanoes. But the underlying cause is, there's one underlying cause causing all of these expressions, all of these volcanoes. As we go through life, all of us suffer pain. We are all suffer emotional pain as well as physical. We suffer hurt, people are unkind, deliberately or otherwise. Our boundaries are crossed. We become stressed and overworked. There are so many things. And if these are not dealt with at the time effectively, then they become volcanoes. And they get added to over time. These volcanoes, they need to be purged from time to time. And we do this to ourselves because on a deep level, you could say a subconscious level, you could say an intuitive level, a spiritual level, or whatever you're more comfortable with. On a deep level, we know that if a large volcano explodes because the emotions have built up and up and up and up, and not enough have been purged over time, and then suddenly it explodes. That would be akin to a psychotic break, an emotional breakdown, a nervous breakdown. These are very catastrophic, can cause a lot of damage in and of themselves. So as a self-protection mechanism, we purge often from these volcanoes to prevent them from getting to that point. The problem is we go through life not realising we're doing this, not realising what's happening. We feel very irritated one day and the slightest thing will set us off, and afterwards we may wonder why we reacted like that. How could such a small thing make us feel such anger? And it's because on a subconscious, spiritual and intuitive level, we use these avenues as catalysts to allow us to purge from these volcanoes. The real cause of that anger was not that specific event. It was a buried anger we need to purge. And we need to do this because as we store these negative emotions, they will cause physical ailments, physical illness over time. When we don't realise what we're doing, we think we really are angry. And so we act as if we're angry at that time because of that catalyst event. Most of us go through life thinking our emotions are based on what is happening here and now. And we act accordingly. We may not understand it, but we act accordingly. Few of us will think that this could be an anger that was buried 20 years ago. The trick, I think, is to perceive your emotional self as separate from you. Almost like you can observe it as being separate from you. So you don't take ownership of the emotions at the time, so that you can allow them to be expressed in a more benign way, a less destructive way. You're not going to repress them. You're not going to try and shove that lava back into that volcano because it's just going to come out in another time, another place. But you're also not going to act as if you have no choice but to act according to your emotional state at any time. By doing this, you are able to manage your actions and behaviours in a way that allows the expression and the purging of this stored energy and emotion without causing unnecessary emotional trauma to yourself and to others around you. If we were taught these tools and techniques from children, the world would be in a much better place, I'm sure. Because look around you. Look within you. And all you see is people purging emotional trauma. And not realising they're doing so. The idea is to purge these volcanoes in a managed way. To eliminate them in a managed way. There are many ways you can do this. If you feel yourself feeling an intense emotion, ask yourself why. If it's caused by, you think at first, by a current situation, ask yourself, is that extent of emotion really warranted? And if you are in doubt about that, then look within to see where else that emotion could have been coming from. Regardless of whether you're able to discern the source or not, because much of this will go back to childhood and even to previous lives, as well as other lives as well, future, concurrent. But you may not believe in that, that's fine. But they will go back to childhood often. Even if you can't discern the source and the cause, you can manage your behaviour better. You can start driving this vehicle rather than allowing your emotional self to drive it. Rather than allowing your 8-year-old self who suffered an emotional trauma to take over this car every now and again. You become more in control of your own vehicle. And this is partly what they mean when they talk about, when you hear it said to act with mindfulness. It's about being aware of your own awareness, being aware of yourself at all times. as we purge these volcanoes, what we eventually find is, once we've expressed in a mindful manner the years of anger and resentment and bitterness and hurt we have against others, what we inevitably will find is that, and we will come to discern that magma chamber below the field of volcanoes. And we'll come to realise that that anger and resentment and bitterness and betrayal and hurt, all of these emotions that we've had bottled inside of us for so long and have been expressing onto others, we realise that really underneath it all, those emotions we're really expressing against ourselves. We feel angry at ourselves. We feel let down by ourselves. We feel we are not good enough. We regret our behaviour, things that we have said and done to others in the past, and we beat ourselves up about it on an emotional level. But that's painful to do that, so most people hide that in a magma chamber underneath their field of emotional volcanoes. And instead they say, no, I'm not angry at myself, I'm angry at that person. And you are angry at that person. But you can't be angry at another person for their behaviour and not be angry at yourself. Because if you are angry at somebody else for their behaviour, you're not acknowledging that they are as flawed as you are. You are expecting perfection from them, and you're angry you didn't get it. And in effect, what you're saying is everybody should be perfect, including myself. So you're angry at yourself. Once you acknowledge that all we are is a spiritual being living in a physical form, and that physical form will undergo programming, positive, neutral and negative, and traumas, hurts, experiences, physical experiences, emotional experiences throughout their lifetime. And that none of us are perfect. We are all flawed. We are all only human, as the saying goes. Once you acknowledge that against the person you have resentment or bitterness about, that they too suffer trauma, they too were programmed by their parents, who were programmed by their parents and their parents, as well as all the other avenues of programming, that they behaved in the way at the time, either because they were, again, misguided and thinking the emotions they were feeling at the time were all warranted by what was going on at that time. They were not acting with mindfulness. Or they did the best thing they possibly could at the time. And hindsight is always 20/20. Once you acknowledge this, you really have no choice but to forgive, to let it go. Because the person you see today that you're angry at is not the same person they were yesterday, or the day before, or the year before, or 5 years before, or 10 years before. Every single one of us is a different person every day. And none of us are perfect. And we all make mistakes. And we all do things sometimes, inevitably, that cause harm to others, that hurt others. But that doesn't mean it was the wrong thing to do at the time. Once you acknowledge all of these things, then you have to forgive them. You have to let it go and start afresh on a clean slate. It doesn't mean you have to have them in your life. It doesn't mean you have to spend time with them. Not necessarily. It's the key is to let that emotion go. That anger, resentment, hatred, whatever names you want to apply to it, that emotion which is eating you up inside, that allows you to release it and let it go, finally. At that point, you then also have no choice but to acknowledge your own acts, your own behaviours, your own part in whatever it is, whatever events occurred that caused this emotional trauma on you. You have to acknowledge that you were a part and party of it. Therefore, you are also responsible. To a lesser or greater degree, it's irrelevant. You can apportion 80%, 20%, 90%, 10%, 70%, 30%. It's irrelevant. The fact is, you were a party of it. You were hurt by it. You were involved. Therefore, you are also responsible. Even if the only thing you admit you're responsible for is the fact that you allowed that to hurt you. But this isn't about beating yourself up. This isn't about castigating yourself for your past behaviours. It's about the acknowledgement that yes, you were responsible as well. But you are also only human and did the best that you could do at that time. Once you give yourself the same acknowledgement of your own state of being, that you are also a spiritual being in a physical form which is flawed, that you also are only human, that is when you can finally forgive yourself. Part of that forgiveness is to understand that you would not be who you are today without those events. Every single person you've ever known or come in contact with would be a different person today without you being the person you were when you were in contact with them, and therefore because of the events that you've experienced through your life. So, how can you look to the past? Hold on while I just put you in the holder. With regret. You can use the mindset that the grass is always going to be greener on another plane, on the other side of the fence, in another timeline, in another reality. But that's subjective. It's not always going to be greener for everybody, is it? And if you acknowledge that we are all spiritual beings living in a physical life, you have to acknowledge that you must forgive everybody for what they've done, for all of the acts that you might think could have been done better or they should not have done. Because we are all subject to programming and flaws, biological, from the minute that we exist as that first fertilized cell, we are subjected to bombardments of emotion and chemicals and electromagnetic radiation and all sorts of other things we haven't discovered yet that change us. And this continues throughout our entire lives. But that is not who you really are. Who you really are is that spiritual being. And that spiritual being isn't subjected to all of this. That spiritual being understands that all spiritual beings are part of one or connected to each other. They are all from the same source, and therefore does not and cannot hold onto resentment, anger, hate, all of these negative emotions against other spiritual beings because of what they may have done when they were incarnated into a physical form and subjected to all of these bombardments of things that shape their lives. This doesn't mean that you condone people hurting you. It doesn't mean that you condone or allow people to cause harm. It's not the same thing at all. True forgiveness is simply the acknowledgement of who they really are, deep, deep inside, that spiritual being. It's acknowledgement that that spiritual being is there, and who their physical form is not the same as that spiritual being. You can judge somebody's behaviour, but you can't judge who they really are. You don't need to. It's unnecessary. Because the spiritual being is not a being that would necessarily perform those behaviours if they had full control. By doing this process, by going through this purging exercise, and this can take years, but by going through these purging exercises to allow these volcanoes to be purged, and then getting to the point where you truly forgive yourself, you learn then to love yourself for the first time. Truly love yourself. Your flaws, your weaknesses, as well as what you consider to be the good things about you, etc. All of these things are subjective, but you learn to love all of you. And then you learn to love all of somebody else, because you recognise that person, even if they're behaving in a way that you wish they would not, they're on their own life path, they're on their own journey. They are going through what they need to go through at any one moment in time. You can then start to help and guide that person. But once you get to the point where you truly learn to love yourself and others for who they really are, and in some cases for even who they are in the physical form, what happens is you allow greater access to you from what many people call your higher self. You might call it your spirit, your soul. You might say God, you might say Source, you might say Allah. All sorts of different names and labels apply to what fundamentally is one thing. And once you have enabled yourself to have greater guidance and greater access, or I should say enabled your higher self to have greater access to you, because they're not trying to punch through layers and layers and layers of emotional karmic trauma that surrounds your aura like layers of an onion. Then life becomes much smoother and you become much happier. So my advice, what I'm trying to say to you, is the importance, is to highlight the importance of getting to that point where you can forgive yourself. Forgiving others is part and parcel of forgiving yourself. One can't happen without the other. So analyse your emotions, analyse where they're coming from. Have you really been self-deceiving yourself for years? Putting the blame for everything negative in your life on other people? Whether some portion of responsibility is warranted or not, that's not what's important. Because you cannot change other people, you can just keep hurting them. You can only change yourself. And to do that, you have to acknowledge that you are responsible as well. You can only make things better for yourself, for the relationships you have with others, by forgiving yourself. Because by doing that, you have to forgive them. It comes as part of it. And then relationships improve. If you are full of anger at somebody or resentment, then they will pick that up. Whether you're trying to hide it or not, They will know that. They intuitively, on a subconscious or spiritual level, they will sense that, and it will affect how they behave towards you. Many people go through life and they just want the other person to understand their pain, that they feel is their fault. So they try to hurt them and hurt them and hurt them. The problem is that affects their behaviour towards you, which causes you more pain, which means you want to hurt them even more to wake them up to your pain. You're causing them pain, so they're doing the same thing now. They're hurting you back to cause you pain, and it's a cycle that gets worse and worse and worse and worse. You're not going to heal your pain by hurting somebody else, because that will directly and indirectly, on a physical level, an emotional level, a spiritual level, on every single level, that will come back to you. All you're going to do is make your pain worse and hurt them in the process. The only thing you can do to heal is to acknowledge your part, accept it. Do not use it as a weapon to hurt yourself. Accept your flaws at the time and forgive yourself. And then you can do the same to others. And then healing happens. Then relationships are improved. Then relationships are repaired. They become more healthy. They become about positive reinforcement instead of negative reinforcement. Find a way to release. Find a way to purge your emotion. Are you good at art? Can you put it into your art? Is there another creative pursuit that you can purge these emotions? Is there a sport that you like to do that you can purge them? Write them down. Write a poem. Write an essay. It doesn't matter how you do it, but you need to do it. So purge them out in a way that you can control the expression, that you can manage that expression, that it's not going to be like Mount Etna going off inside of you, which is just going to cause catastrophic damage all around you. By doing that, you heal yourself on every level, and you heal others as well. And you allow them this space to heal. Because when they're not feeling like they're constantly under emotional and spiritual attack by you, it's like a breath of fresh air, and finally they can relax and then begin their own healing process. Okay, so that's all I wanted to talk about today, and I hope for some of you you find this helpful. And like I said, please like, share and subscribe, and I will see you next time. And take care of yourself, and most of all, appreciate your life and everybody within it. Okay, bye.